Hello everyone, welcome to our channel Clinical SAS. So today we are going to discuss macros and macro variables and macro programming and what are the macro functions available in SAS. We'll discuss. Okay, let's start. So here in SAS programming we can see macros and debug options. So first of all, why we use this macros and macros programming? So we will use the macros to avoid the repetition and we will create the macros. Okay, so whenever we are doing programming, right? So if the same code will be there, right? For to we have, if you want to write multiple times, it will take time. For that, we will create the macros. So if you create the macros, now what will be the advantage? It will save the time to the programmer. So no need to write the program again, right? Since that is the same program, like that variable variation will be there. So in that, what will happen? The time will be saved for programmer. So then quantity of work will be increased. So the saving of the time for programmer, he can increase the quantity of work. He will work on more and he will create more programs, right? Like then quality of work will be increased. So if you use the macros, right, we will not get the any errors. So in that case, that the quality of work also will increase. So error-free result. So while using the macros, right? So we'll not get the any error. So the work also will be faster. Okay. So in SAS programming, so how to use the macros? So how to use the macros we'll see. So first of all, when you are going to write the macros programming, first you understand the requirement. What is your requirement? So then you write the base SAS code. So first you write the whatever regular program is there, right? That code you need to write. So then you need to understand what variables are going to change. So during the programming, so what and variable we are going to change, and then you that variables you will convert to macro variables. Okay. Then the total programming converted as a macro code. Then as per requirement, you can call the macro variables and macro programming. Okay. So in this macro programming, we are going to cover that create the macro programming. Then how we are going to create the macro programming and as well as macro variable creation. So what are the macro variables and how we are going to create? Then scope of macro variables. What is the scope of macro variables? Then as well as macro functions and macro debugging options, and how to save the macro user defined location and how to call. So if we are creating the macro programming or macro variables, you want to create in your uh, PC or location, right? Then again how we need to call, we'll discuss. So here we can see how to create the macro programming in SAS. So here, why if you want to create the macro programming for entire code, first we need to write percentage macro, then macro name, your lab underscore data. Okay, then percentage mn, that macro name. In between only we need to write the programming. So after that we need to for a complete program you need to call, right? For that percentage lab underscore data we need to write. Then it will execute. So every time no need to write the entire code. Just we can write percentage lab underscore data, then it will run. Okay. So here also same percentage macro ex1, but inside the programming we have created the some variables, right? So that variables before itself we defined. Then we called in inside the macro programming. Then we can call the macro programming. So if you want to run this programming, right, just we need to call percentage ex1. Here ex1 is the macro programming name. Okay. So from here we not created the any variable. but here we created the inside the macro programming some variables, then outside we defined. That is the difference. So macro variables. So in SAS macro variable creation type, how many types is available to create the macro variables? Okay, there is 5 types of macro variable creation is there in SAS. Okay, first is percentage let method and using macro parameter, and the third one is do iterate loop method, proc SQL into method, calls input method. Okay, so first we'll discuss percentage let. So by using percentage let, we can create the macro variable. So here percentage let x is equal to 10. So we created x macro variable. Okay. If you call percentage put ampersand x, right? The x value it will show in log. That x value it will show in log. The same way percentage let name is equal to Sekar. Here also we created macro variable name. So what is the inside macro variable value? We need to call the by using percentage put ampersand name. Here the text we can write anything like, so just I written percentage put macro name is ampersand name. So in log window it will show macro name is Shaker. Okay. So here this percentage let macro variable creation we can do anywhere like in data step, proc step and macro programming also we can use the percentage let to create the macro variable. This is the one method to create the macro variable. Okay. Second one is using macro parameters. So using macro parameters, two types is available. One is positional parameter and named parameter. So once you see here we can see, so here we created macro programming by using percentage macro. Okay. So here we need to create the macro variables. Okay. So here example you can see percentage macro, my macro. Here we assign the variables, right? Like ampersand NDS, this and all macro variables. Okay, we defined here and we assigned inside the macro programming by using the positional parameters. And the same programming we used named parameter by here we can see NDS is equal to G. See every variables in front we are using is equal to. So what is the difference between positional parameter and named parameters, right? So in positional parameter, we need to follow the order. Like first we need to create the macro variables. We need to assign the first. Second variable, second we need to assign here. See here order we can see NDS, LB, DS, X. These are macro variables. So inside programming also first NDS, then lib, then DS by using the ampersand. For name parameters, no need to follow the order. We can create the any order. Why? Because here we use is equal to symbol. Okay, that is the only different for positional parameter and named parameter. Okay, for here percentage let by using percentage in let method, we are calling percentage put ampersand x, right? So what is the inside the macro variable? For positional parameter also, we can check the macro variable value, but that is not possible in outside the programming. We need to call the inside the macro program. Here you can see percentage put macro variable. So then this will value it will show in log, but we cannot call the outside the macro programming. Okay. So third one is percentage do iterate loop method. So here we can see one example. So if you want to append the number of data set, every time we need to write the set method. So first one data set we need to set, then second data we need to set, like that. Number of times we need to write the macro programming, correct? No? So by using percentage do iterate method, we can write in this way. Here we can see percentage macro my loop. Here data set name percentage do n is equal to 1 to 6 by 1. So 1 by 1 we need to append. So here proc append base. What is the base data set name that we need to mention? Then data. So what is the first we need to first month data set we need to append. So then automatically second, third, fourth like that up to 6 months data it will append. Okay. So here 1 to 6 also we can create the macro variable. See here. So first one data set name, the start month. So here 1 to 6 is there, right? So here percent start month. Then year 6 we return as the year end month. For this also we can create the macro variable. Okay. So next one proc SQL into method. Here we can see proc SQL into method by using proc SQL into method how to create the macro variables. Okay. Here we can see program data month input month salary cards then January 1000. Here only one observations and two variables, right? So we need to create the for month macro variable. For that, what we need to write? Proc SQL select month. Which variable we are going to create the macro variable? That variable name we need to write. Then into, then is to. Then we need to write the variable macro variable name. This macro variable name we need to write from which data set, that data set name we need to write. Then quit. So then we need to call the macro variable means what is the macro variable inside is there means how we need to call percentage put mth. Once you call no, then it will show in log Jan that macro variable value it will show Jan in log window. This is for only one variable, right? So we can simply we can create. If we have like multiple observations, so all observations I need a single macro variable. In that time, what you need to write? Same proc SQL select month. Here month is this variable. So which for which variable we are going to create the macro variables, that variable name we need to mention here. Then into, then is to, then here that macro variable name separated by space from month. Once you write and execute and call for ampersand, sorry, percentage put ampersand mth now, then it will show in log Jan space, Feb space, March space, like that it will come. Usually this will not use this method. Okay. So if you want each observation, I need separate observation. Like I need to call like only I need February only or like January. Like that means here we can see. So I need each observation as a separate variable. Okay. In that case, same proc SQL select which variable we are going to create the macro variable, that variable name into mth1 dash is to mth3. Here 1 comma 3 means what? From starting observation to ending observation. For this also you can create the macro variable, okay, if required. Then from month means which data set. Then quit. See here if you call percentage put mth2 no, then February, the February value it will show in log. Then if you call percentage put mth3 no, it will show the March. Why? Because we have created the each observation as a macro variable. Okay. So here last one calls input method. So by using calls input method also we can create the macro variable. So earlier we discussed, right? By using proc SQL into method we created the macro variables. On the same programming and we can create the macro variables. So whatever earlier we discussed, no, same like we can use calls input also we can create the macro variables. Okay. So So this is the data set. For this data set, we need to create the macro variable by using calls input. So for that, what we need to write? So here data step only we need to write. So here already I mentioned, right? Calls input method data step. So here data step only we are creating the calls input macro variable by using the calls input. So here like that we need to write data underscore null set month calls input here double quote in mth. This is the macro variable for month variable. Okay. Only in calls input method only we will use double quote for macro variable. Okay. Then if you call percentage put ampersand mpts, right? That macro variable will show in log. So now here is in a single observations like proc scale also we created for single observations, right? By using proc scale into method. So same like that we can create by using calls input method also for single observation. So proc scale by using proc scale into method multiple variable for multiple variable also we created a macro variable. The same thing how to create the multiple for a multiple observation for macro variables. So for that what we need to write? So in data underscore null set that data set name calls input macro variable name in double quotes here strip of put underscore n underscore paste dot then macro variable like what which variable you are going to create the macro variables then run. If you call no then percentage put ampersand mth, right? Then it will show the in log February. Then if you want to call for March, no, percentage put ampersand mth3. Okay. So earlier we discussed it. Same for multiple observation for macro variable creation, proc SQL into mth1 to mth3. Same way we can create by using calls input method in this way. Okay. So here I need for total observations, I need macro variable. So for that, we need to write code by using data step in data step by using calls input method. So in the, like this, we need to write. So data underscore null if zero, then set SAS help dot class nobs. Nobs means number of observations we are assigning to n for variable. Then again we are creating the macro variable for n. Calls input cnt in double quote n run percentage put ampersand cnt. What will happen in SAS help dot class? How many variables like how many observations is there? For total observations, single macro variable we are creating by using the calls input method. The same thing I need for using proc SQL into method also we can create the for total observation. For total observation also we can create the macro variable. For that how to write code means proc SQL select count star into count star into we need to write the macro variable name obs underscore count from SAS help dot class quit. So what will happen? It will count the number of observations and it will assign that value into the obs underscore count. Okay. Then we can call percentage put ampersand obs underscore count means it will show the number of observation values in log window. Okay. Scope of macro variables. So scope of macro variables like one is global macro variable and the second one is local macro variable. So earlier we discussed, right, the five types of macro variable creation. That five types of macro variable creation, which one belongs to global macro variable and which one belongs to local macro variable. Okay. So percentage let is we can consider as a global macro variable and local macro variable. So what is the difference between a global macro variable and local macro variable means? So if you create the macro variable inside the macro programming, we can call local macro variable. If you create the macro variable outside the programming, we can call that is global macro variable. Okay. So percentage let macro variable by using a percentage let we can create the global macro variable and local macro variable. Okay. Then macro parameter by using macro parameter like positional named parameter, right? So we cannot create the global macro variables. That is only local macro variable. Why? Because this by using the uh, macro parameter we cannot create the outside the macro variable. Okay. Then one more percentage do iterate. So percentage do iterate also we cannot create the outside the programming. So we need to consider this one local macro variable. Okay. Proc SQL into here also proc SQL into. So by using proc SQL into we can create the macro variable inside the programming also you can create outside programming also we can create the macro variables. So we can consider both. Okay, by using proc SQL into method, we can create the global macro variables and local macro variables. Calls input. So even calls input also same, right? So here percentage global and percentage local. So these are the options. Okay, percentage global and percentage local. Okay, so here a global macro variable we can reference anywhere except data lines. Okay, we can refer the anywhere in the programming. But local macro variable during the execution of the macro which the variables are created. So inside the program only, whenever we are calling that macro programming language, inside the program only we need to call the local macro variable. So we have discussed macro variable creation and scope of macro variables. So now macro functions. Okay. So in SAS there is a macro functions is there. Okay. So in SAS macro functions are macro evaluation functions and macro quoting functions, macro character functions, other macro functions. Okay. So first one is macro evaluation function. So then in evaluation function means one is percentage eval and the second one is sys eval. Okay. Then macro quoting functions. In macro quoting functions also two functions is available. One is compilation function. The second one is execution of macro quoting function. Okay. These quoting functions will use it for this type of character to mask or quote in the macro programming. So what is the use for this macro quoting functions means here we can see special characters are divided in three types like type 1. Type 1 means in the operators like plus operators will be there, arithmetic operators, and for that mnemonics like plus and or not symbol, any, le, then miscellaneous blank like blank space, double quotes, this and all is there. Right? This and all we can consider as a type 1. Then type 2 means unmatched characters like single quote, single bracket. This we can call unmatched character. And a type 3 is called macro triggers. Macro triggers means ampersand and percent. So for this, we need to mask while writing the macro program. For that, we will use the macro quoting functions. Okay. Then third one is macro character functions. So what are the macro character functions is there? We'll discuss. Okay. Then other functions other than character functions. What is the other macro functions? Okay. So second one is macro quoting function. So first one is macro evaluation function. In that we can see percentage eval, and second one is percentage syseval. Second one is macro quoting function. So in macro quoting functions, we can see two types. One is compilation function, and the second one is execution of macro quoting function. So first, what is the difference between compilation functions and execution of macro quoting function means? So compilation function means first we have created the macro variable and compile the macro variables. Then execution of macro quoting function means first we assign the macro variables and then later we are executing the macro variable, right? During the execution only we are confirming the what is the macro variable value. Okay, so what that is the difference. Okay, so for compilation functions we can see two quoting functions. One is percentage str and second one is percentage nrstr. For execution of macro quoting function we can see the five quoting function. One is the percentage code, percentage NR code, percentage B code, percentage NRB code, percentage super Q. So here overall quoting functions regularly will use percentage str and percentage NR str, and from execution of macro quoting function we can use only percentage B code and NRB code super Q. Okay. So here by using percentage str and NR str, type 1, type 2, type 3, that character functions like special character is there, right? For we need to mask no. For that percentage str we can mask the type 1, type 2, and type 3 we cannot mask. Type 3 means that macro triggers. But by using the nrstr we can mask the all type of characters, special characters in compilation. Okay. For coming to execution of macro quoting function, same like how it can working like str, same thing percentage code. Like here percentage near str how it's working to mask all type 1 type 3. The same way we can do in percentage nr code 2. But difference is here we can mask the compilation time, but here execution time only we can mask. Okay, percentage b code and nrb code also same. Okay, but only difference is for here no need to use the percentage symbol for type 2. Okay, then super Q also same, it will mask the all types. NRB code also it will mask the all types. Okay, so next macro character functions. In macros we can see the some character functions. So what are the macro character functions? We'll see. One is percentage index, percentage length, percentage scan, percentage q scan, percentage substar, percentage q substar, percentage upcase, percentage q upcase. So whenever writing macro programming, right? So if you want to use the upcase character function, you need to use percentage upcase. Then only it will work. Okay. These are the some of the character functions. So for if you want to use this index, this all character functions is there, you need to use the percentage symbol. Okay. Other functions like sim global, sim local, sim exist, sim get, syspunc, and percentage q syspunc. Okay. So last topic, debug macro options. So while writing the macro programming, if you get an error, we need to debug the programming, right? For that we have three options. One is option mprint and option mlogic and option symbolgen. If you use the option mprint, it will print the base SAS code in log window. So option mlogic also, it will print the details of execution, starting execution and ending of execution in log. Even option symbolgen, what will do? It will print the each macro variable value in the log. Okay, this all it will print in log window only. Okay, Here in macro programming, we can see the default errors. One is M error and S error. So when you are invoking the macro programming, you will get the M error. When you invoke the macro variable, you will get the S error. Okay, these are the default macro variable errors. Okay, thank you.